is a huge honor today to be interviewing Mike Bark, who's a CPA and a CVA. CPA is Certified Public Accountant. CVA is Certified Value Analyst.
Correct. Yes.
And I just wrote a new book, and how to manage people, time, and money. And business only manages three things. You make something, sell something, watch the numbers. And dude, you got an uphill climb because I'm a dentist. I'm guilty. Dentists just want to fix teeth, and they have to wear a lot of hats. They got to manage people, they got to manage money, and they just it's not what percent of the dentists you work with just really love to watch their numbers. That when you meet with them, you can just sense they know all the numbers. They love to watch the numbers. They're just totally into numbers as much as they are doing root canals.
I would say there's about 10 to 15% who you look at them and you go, if the dental thing doesn't work out, we got a job for you. When this is all over.
So you're saying about 85% of the dentists, this is a task. This is a chore. They really don't want to do this.
I don't think that's even dental exclusive. I think that's across other medical professionals, other businesses. Even in running our business, I don't know that we necessarily like looking at our numbers all that much.
Yeah.
So accounting is always that thing that gets pushed to the background a lot by people.
So you got an hour with about 7,000 dentists today who really would prefer it if I was interviewing someone who's going to teach them how to do a root canal, a filling, or a crown. So let's just start off with when people think of their accountant, there's three statements. There's a profit and loss or a statement of income, which is mostly for the IRS and taxes. And then there's a balance sheet. What balances your asset, like your house, with what you have into it, your equity minus the liability that you owe on it, which is mostly used for getting other people's money, a loan, a debt, or dividing up your money in a divorce. And then the third one's a statement of cash flow. But most of these dentists think of their accountant as the bearer of bad news of how much I owe the IRS. So let's start off with the first question is how much of your job when you're dealing with dentists is about taxes? And is there do I just shut up and pay my taxes, or are there things I can do to save money on taxes?
Obviously, a big part of what people lean on us for is their taxes. That's the part they're afraid of. They're afraid of the IRS coming in. And yes, there are some things you can do to minimize your taxes that sometimes get overlooked. I think a lot of people think there's a magic bullet that we can fire to get you out of paying taxes. And if that was the case, I wouldn't be paying taxes myself, and I still get to pay taxes. So there's no magic bullet. But if you do a lot of little things right along the way, you should be able to save some income taxes. And if we're doing our job as a CPA, depending on the practice, we're looking at trying to save $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year on taxes by making sure you're incorporated correctly, by making sure you have the right retirement plan for your situation, making sure you're taking advantage of income splitting. It could be your spouse, it could be your children, making sure you're not overlooking deductions. For example, a lot of dentists won't take a deduction for automobile at all because they don't want to raise this red flag with the IRS, or they won't want to write off any meals and entertainment whatsoever because they don't want to raise a red flag. So we try to educate them on those topics and make sure they're taking advantage of everything they can, but we do tell them up front we can't get you out of paying taxes.
So give them some low-hanging fruit on saving taxes.
I think the biggest one's entity selection. We see a lot of dentists where we take over their accounting, and they might be structured as a C corporation or a sole proprietorship still, and 9 times out of 10 they'd be better off as an S corporation. And the reason is the S corporation has this concept of W-2 income and profit distribution. And the nice part of profit distribution is you're not paying FICA and Medicare tax on it. So if you look at a established dental practice that's being taxed as a sole proprietor, in many cases they're spending $5,000 to $6,000 a year more in FICA taxes than they need to be.
So
I think that's a big one.
And you think
and in terms of
go ahead.
And I think, just overlooking certain deductions. For example, a lot of dentists won't, if they're buying lunch and everything for their entire staff or meeting expense, they'll just lump that into meals and entertainment, which is only 50% deductible. So if you put it in a meeting account because you're buying it for everybody, it's 100%. I think a lot of dentists are afraid to take the automobile deduction, and not that you can write off your entire car or anything like that, but if you think about it, if you're running the business, yes, that first commute's not deductible, but you're running to the bank, you're running to Costco, you're running to continuing education, and all that stuff starts adding up, that those are some deductions that should be being taken. And I think a big one that's always overlooked is if a practice, they've gotten to a point they're successful, they have cash flow, and they're saying, well, how can I save even more on taxes? Well, if your spouse isn't working or taking advantage of a retirement plan, there's no reason they can't be on your payroll as well. And then that way you can double up your 401k or simple IRA contribution.
So as a CPA, what lessons did you personally learn from Martha Stewart, Wesley Snipes, Willie Nelson, Nicolas Cage, Mark Anthony, and all the other celebrities who have gone to jail for tax evasion?
I'm too pretty for jail.
You're too pretty for jail? That's a good one. I love that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you're right. So they are afraid of the IRS. I mean, lots of famous people have gone to jail for the IRS. Have you ever seen a dentist go to jail for the IRS?
No, we've never had that. And in 18 years of practicing, I've only had 3 IRS audits of dental clients. 3. So that either means I'm being way too conservative with taking deductions, which I don't think we're in that realm. I think it means that the IRS has bigger fish to fry, or put simply, there's not the red flags that people think there are when it comes to doing this stuff. You know, if you have some amount of meals and entertainment on your financial statement, that's going to be usual and customary. If you have $1 million worth of it, yeah, they might come and take a look, and they might come in and audit that particular issue. But usually you have more to worry about from your state income taxes than you do your federal.
Now, you're in a suburb, you're in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee?
Correct.
Do you mostly do dentists in Milwaukee, or do you do dentists in other states too?
Yeah, our firm is a comprehensive business advisory firm where we have brokerage, we have marketing, we do accounting. About 65% of our clients are in the Midwest, and you know we've been growing and we've been adding all over the country.
And so, if someone wants to ask you most of my audience is commuting to work right now. So your website is edgeadvise.com. Your email is mike@edgeadvise.com. That's edge, E-D-G-E, advise, A-D-V-I-S-E.com. Tell them why they should contact you.
I think we offer some unique services that other CPA firms don't offer in terms of marketing, in terms of if they need to hire an associate, we have that service. If they need to sell their practice at some point, we know that. So even if you don't use those services, I always say to a client, I learn a lot as a CPA from some of the stuff that those people are seeing in real time. So if we're talking about practice valuation, I have no better resource than to walk down the hall and talk to my partner, Andy, about what's really going on in the market right now. What are the DSOs doing? You know, are they overpaying like the perception is, or are they paying fair market value? You know, we've seen marketing plans that work, don't work, have done well because we've tried all of them. So I think that gives us a unique perspective. And I know a lot gets made out of this whole dental CPA, or you need a dental CPA versus a generic CPA. And I think certainly some of that stuff is true as well. I mean, all of our clients are dentists, so we're able to benchmark you
all
against...
of your clients are dentists?
I should say about 80% of our clients are dentists.
But don't you think that's a huge advantage for you? I mean, wouldn't I rather talk to a guy like you who is looking at a bunch of dentists as opposed to a CPA who, when I hang up the phone, his next client owns a dry cleaner or a tanning salon or a restaurant or a plumber?
Well, I think the big advantage is giving you some context on your numbers. So, for example, if you're saying, you know, I need to add a hygienist, can I afford to do that? We can look at metrics to say, yes, you know, we're looking at your production. And yeah, it does seem like based on how you're booking, based on what your numbers look like, you can add that hygienist now. Or if you're looking at adding an associate, where do you need to be to get that associate in the door? We're able to establish relationships with banks that will lend to dentists. So yeah, I think having the context and being able to say, here's where your practice is strong. And most practices do 80 to 85% of the stuff really well. but here's the 15% where you can improve on, because we're seeing other dentists do a better job in these areas than you are. So now go and do likewise. I think giving the dentist a context in those numbers should be helpful.
And that's what the industry generally refers to as benchmarking, correct?
Correct. I think the benchmarking, and I think having the contacts within the dental industry. So if they're looking at buying equipment or they need a loan, being able to go to those resources and have a good working relationship with them, I think gives us a leg up over an accountant who might not be speaking that language.
And the bank also probably thinks they're in good hands, or you're filtering out crazy people, or you're advising people you don't need to get a loan right now. So the bank's seeing you as bringing them qualified leads.
Well, I think the banks, at least the large banks that do dental lending, are happy because the default rate in dental is microscopic. It's, I believe, 0.5% of all dentists default on their loans, which is, in the scheme of things, nothing. So U.S. Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, PNC have recognized that opportunity. And I think one of the misconceptions that a lot of young dentists have is, okay, I have this overwhelming amount of student loan debt. How am I ever going to buy a dental practice? And the fact of the matter is there's 5 or 6 banks that are just waiting to give you 100% financing to go and do that.
Yeah, I hear it all the time, and you're right. That is a huge disconnect in the dental industry. The dental students all believe they have no access to capital. A lot of the DSO kings are out there claiming that the reason they're so successful is because these kids don't have access to capital, when that's their advantage to say that, so everybody will go work for them, when the truth of the matter is they have total access to 100% financing with a 0.5% default rate. You rattled off you said 5 or 6 banks. You said U.S. Bank. That's out of what? Charlotte, North Carolina?
I believe their main office is in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Then Wells Fargo. What's that? San Francisco?
Wells Fargo in California.
Yeah. So what were the other ones you rattled off?
PNC Bank, which is out of Pennsylvania.
PNC Bank?
PNC.
Oh, PNC.
I believe Pennsylvania National, or whatever. I'm not sure what it stands for.
Okay. I haven't heard that one. PNC Bank out of Pennsylvania. What were some other ones you said?
I think Bank of America is still, right there with most other banks.
Is it Bank of America or Skank of America?
It depends on who you talk to.
That's an old NBA joke from ASU. Just only because it rhymed. But what's the other one?
Those are the 4 big ones that we
Bank,
use for most loans.
Wells Fargo, PNC Bank, and Bank of America. Chase is Chase a big player in that area or not really?
Every now and then you'll see them pop up in a loan,
but they're not. They're not.
But
the big
they've been
4.
inconsistent, right? Yeah. They're not one of the big 4.
Okay, so you just told these students that they can get access to 100% financing, and these 4 banks are on top of it because they're looking at a 0.5% failure rate. Unbelievable. I want to ask you. I'm always trying to focus on the kids the most because deep down inside, I believe the 50-year-old guys like me need the littlest amount of help, and these kids coming out of school, and they're coming to forks in the road, and if they make the wrong turn, some of those mistakes cost them 5-10 years. Tell me if this is true or not, because sometimes you don't know if the rumors are what people are saying on the dental town boards. Is it actually true? Because we hear this. We hear that dentists pay these young kids out of school as an independent contractor, so they don't have to pay FICA matching specifically. I don't have to take out taxes and treat you as an employee. It's cheaper for an employer dentist to hire an employee dentist as an independent contractor. I don't have to do that, correct? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and is the savings pretty much only the FICA matching, the matching, the Social Security? So,
it's a couple of things. One's the FICA match. One's going to be retirement contribution. If they have a 401k, I don't have to put an independent contractor within my 401k. If I'm offering health insurance, I don't have to worry about that person's health insurance at that point. And I can probably also make them pay their liability insurance and some of those other things.
And the FICA matching is 7.5%, is it?
On the first $117,000 of wages, it is, and then it goes down to 1.45% after that.
To 138 or
after 117, it goes down to 1.45%.
For eternity? There's
for
no
eternity
there's no
until
cap. So when you're a young kid and you're going to work for old fat baldy dentist, and they say, "Well, I want you to be an independent contractor," it's because they're trying to save the 7.5% FICA matching on the Social Security, health insurance, blah 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 blah. But
Mhm.
Doc, I have heard several times, maybe 3 or 4 times in my 20 years, that employee dentist was not paying his taxes, and 5 years later, that employee dentist got audited, and they went back to the dentist and said, "You owe him the taxes," and the dentist said, "No, he was an independent contractor," and they say, "Really? Well, an independent contractor was basically designed for construction. I need a plumber." So the plumber come in and laid all the plumbing. I don't understand plumbing. He brought his own tools. He brought his own equipment. He brought in anything. And that's not what this dentist was. This dentist came into your office with your tools and your equipment, with your hours, with your front office doing the insurance, billing, collecting, whatever. And they go through a checklist and they say, he was not an independent contractor. He did not pay his taxes, and thus you are liable. And he worked for you for 5 years and cut me a check right now for $130,000 plus penalties and interest. And I know 3 or 4 dentists that literally cried when they told me this story. So, so is an associate dentist doing general dentistry in a general dentist's office really an independent contractor? Would that really pass the IRS muster test?
No, I don't believe it would. I mean, some of the standards, you have to be able to set your own schedule. You're supposed to be working with your own tools and all these things that make it very hard for a general dentist, I think, to pass that smell test. We'll tell clients that, if they want to be aggressive, ultimately it's their decision to make. If they want to do it, there's probably a reasonable chance that you're never going to get audited. But if you do, don't come back to me and say, hey, you should have told me that.
So it's rare that you're going to get audited. It's rare that your employee dentist isn't going to not pay his taxes. But you and I both agree and are telling everybody that if everything goes wrong, you get audited, and that guy did not pay his taxes, you are going to be liable plus penalties. And you're not going to do this. And I want to add one more thing. When you go to the IRS court, there's no jury. There's only a jury if you do a crime. But when you go to the IRS judge, it's you, the IRS judge, and you lose. Is that a fair assessment?
Not necessarily, because, taxpayers have made a lot of progress. One of the big ones that affects dental is this concept of personal goodwill. There's been court cases, and one of the reasons dental practices can by and large sell for capital gain treatment is because a taxpayer went in there and won the personal goodwill fight for them. But I would tell a doctor who wants to make their associate an independent contractor, now unless your associate doesn't have much on the ball, they're going to understand, well, now I got to pay the 7.5% of tax. Now I'm not getting a retirement. I'd like to get paid more. So I think the little bit you might get in tax savings, I would assume the associate, if they have some competent representation on their side, is going to want a higher amount of money from you. But doesn't really save any money.
But I think it's bad for us older. I don't do it. I pay mine as employees. And the reason I'll tell you why is, let's get real. When a young kid's coming out of school, how organized are they going to be taking part of their paycheck and put it in an IRS savings fund so that when their taxes are due next April, they're going to have the money set aside? What percent of the kids are going to be that organized to do that versus getting their paycheck, depositing it in their savings account, seeing all this money, and then running off to Home Depot to buy something? You just get kids in trouble by you trying to miserly do this, what's not even legal. The IRS judge, when they go through the independent contractor bullets, I think there's last time I saw there's 14 questions. You're going to lose on every one of those questions. And I just think the industry should stop doing it. Pay these kids as employees or don't get them.
I would tend to agree with you.
Well,
so I think the only case you can make for independent contractors, in my opinion, is somebody who's going to come in very infrequently into your office, or if it's a specialist.
Yeah,
those make sense.
Like when a dental anesthesiologist comes to my office because they're going to put I'm not going to put anybody to sleep, because 28 years of watching dentistry, if anybody ever dies in a dental office, and the shit hits the fan, there's usually almost always an IV in their arm. And when you go on the witness stand for that, and a board-certified anesthesiologist comes in and starts asking you anesthesiology questions, you're going to look like the idiot that you are, and it's just horrible. And when these dentists, that happens to them, it ruins their personal life, financial life. But when that independent contractor comes in, he has a dolly with these tubs, and he's just like a plumber, electrician. He's bringing his own equipment, his own monitors, his own drugs, his own skill set, and that is a true independent contractor. So if some specialist is coming into your office and they have their own knowledge and tools and equipment, and they also bring in their own dental assistant if they want one. So that is truly an independent contractor. But someone working for you Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, in your hours with your policies, doing what they're told and going through the system, that's just not it. Okay, so we beat that up enough. Setting up the books. How do you like to see books set up? And furthermore, I got to ask you, for digital, are you a big fan of Intuit owns Quicken, QuickBooks Plus, QuickBooks Pro? I think Microsoft, didn't they buy Great Plains Accounting? Mm-hmm. I'm an old guy, so I still love Peachtree. Am I an idiot for being on Peachtree? What do you recommend?
Right now, the vast majority of our clients are in QuickBooks Online. It's the dominant software platform out there. Okay.
I'm going to quit here. QuickBooks Online, but go through the other ones, because the big brands are QuickBooks Pro. What about QuickBooks Pro, or what are the other QuickBooks? And then tell them why you like QuickBooks.
QuickBooks has both a desktop version of their software, and they also have now an online or a cloud-based version. Our preference is for the cloud-based version because you can work on it from anywhere. If a client who's doing their own books has a question, we're able to look at stuff in real time with them and help them figure stuff out, or if something's off, or fix a problem. We're looking at the same exact screen. We don't have to wait for them to, send over a backup, or send us a key drive in order for us to look at their books. So
okay, and what do you say? Because my job is I know what these guys are asking, because I read what they're saying on Dental Town all day long. What would you say to the dentist who says, I'm not putting my information online? Are you crazy? Someone's going to hack into that and steal all my money.
I would think it's in QuickBooks, who's a massive company. It's in their best interest to make sure this stuff is secure. And I'm guessing they're doing a better job than the PC guy that you have coming into your dental office. So, exactly. We've seen accountants. We've graduated to using cloud-based tax software, cloud-based. And again, I think that's security could always be breached, but in our feeling, these are massive companies that have a lot to lose if they do get breached. So their system's going to be way more secure than the dentist down the block.
Okay, so you recommend QuickBooks Online. How much is that? Do I have to get a disk installed on my computer? It's totally cloud-based. You just go to QuickBooks Online, and how much is that a month?
It depends on your accountant. We actually eat the cost of QuickBooks Online for our clients because we get a wholesale price, so we get it for $10 a month. So we tell a client, hey, it's convenient enough for us to have you on this platform because I don't have to drive out and make a backup or worry about you sending a backup. We'll just include that in our fee.
Okay, so if
we have a flat fee billing system, and it's just included in that.
So if I was driving to work right now and I want to use you because my accountant only has one dentist client and it's me, and I want the benchmarking, I want the value added, I want someone who sees my industry and thinks about my industry all the time, as opposed to jumping around from cattle farmers to corn farmers to Dairy Queens. So I go to edgeadvise.com and I ask for the good-looking, handsome, bald guy named Mike Barr, and you're going to set me up this QuickBooks Online. I want to ask you specifically, are you mostly just going to give me a statement of income, a P&L, and help me with my taxes? What about, do I need to see a statement of cash flow? How often will you update my balance sheet? What do I need to know about managerial accounting or financial accounting, or, how much is this going to be about just taxes, and how much is this going to be about managerial accounting? And how come I keep reading, every time you read the Wall Street Journal, they'll talk about, they show the reports of a company with, like, say, the P&L, statement of cash flow, the balance sheet. How come all the dentists I know only get a P&L and don't even know what a statement of cash flow is? How come it'd be easier to find a dentist who was abducted by aliens than a dentist who got a statement of cash flow from their CPA?
Well, in defense of the CPAs on the statement of cash flows is much more important if you have a lot of debt on your practice, because you're going to have this money going out to service a debt that you're not necessarily going to get a tax deduction for. So you're always looking into, all right, my income statement has said I made $100,000. Why do I only have $20,000 of cash? The other reason for it is, and this sounds bad, but we can only do what clients are willing to pay for. And a statement of cash flows is really designed for an accrual-based accounting system, meaning we're entering accounts payable, we're accruing expenses, and we're doing things that big manufacturers and big accounts would generally do with their accounting. Most clients don't want to pay for that.
And you don't think they need it?
Yeah.
And you don't think they need it?
I think if they have debt, I think it's important to understand where the cash flow is going. I think it's important we do a key performance indicator report on top of our financials that analyzes things like collections, it analyzes hygiene efficiency, and some other metrics that we put out there. But in terms of their core financial statement, yeah, for the most part, they're going to be concerned about the profit and loss statement because a lot of their expense drivers are right on there. The balance sheet in a dental office isn't overly critical in that dental practice valuation and things like that are built off cash flow. They're built off profit and loss. They're not really built off the balance sheet. You're not putting inventory on there and a bunch of other things to create a bunch of long-term equity
on the
balance sheet. So most are going to...
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what I want to hone in on is there's the income statement, the P&L for taxes. But for managerial accounting, you're saying you don't really need a statement of cash flow, the balance sheet, but you give them this dashboard of metrics. Will you go through those dashboards, exactly what those metrics are, what range that you like to see them in, and go through that for us?
Absolutely. If we look at KPIs in a practice, if we look at our most profitable practices, there's a couple things they have. Yep, a couple things they have in common. One is if we look at their production by provider, hygiene will be making up roughly 30% of the overall production. If that number is much less, there's a good chance that dentist isn't going to hit the 55% overhead because everything's concentrated in dental production. And there's a good chance that their year-to-year income statement may look more like a person having a heart attack because they don't have enough hygiene patients to sustain production. So you have one year where you hit a bunch of big cases, and it looks great, but you have the next year where people aren't accepting it and you don't have enough hygiene there to do it. In terms of evaluating whether it's an associate, whether it's evaluating a hygienist, the good news and bad news for those people is we know exactly how much money they're worth. We do individualized production per hour, production wage ratios for those positions because we want hygienists to be producing at minimum producing 3 times what they're being paid at minimum. But we also know if we chart out all of our clients, good hygienists are at 3.75 to 4 times to 1. We know a good hygienist can produce at least $150 an hour. And if we're not seeing it, now we can drill down deeper and say, okay, if you have your hygienist and they're producing $90 an hour, chances are, I would guess they probably have 3% perio codes and need to be doing a lot more perio and aren't charting correctly or maybe are missing x-rays or missing any number of things.
Have you ever dealt with any hygiene consultant that could go into an office and help them improve that hygiene department? I mean, if they're using you and you're the one at Edge Advice saying, here's a red flag, your hygienist is only doing 15% of production and it could be 30%. Do you know of any names of people or agencies where a hygiene consultant go in there and help you turn that around?
Well, one of our partners is Noelle Hilly. She's part of Edge. She goes in and she does back office consulting. So if we're seeing hygiene numbers way less than average, we're certainly going to suggest to the client that it might be worth their time to bring Noelle in to go over protocols and to go over those things to help increase those numbers. And she's seen great results when she's gone in.
Can you have her do a podcast with me on that question?
Absolutely.
Really? That would be rocking hot. I would love that because that's huge. So you're right. So a lot of times dentists say, well, should I pay my hygiene? Like in Arizona, when hygienists come in, they can get $40 an hour anywhere. So if the going rate is about, and it's so different because in San Francisco and Manhattan, you can't hire one for under 50 an hour. And there are some states in the South where you can hire a hygienist for 15 hours. But what you're saying is a better way of looking at it is times production. So if you're paying her $1 an hour, she should be bringing in $3 to $4 an hour, or you should fix that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a revenue-producing job, and obviously the good and the bad for the hygienist is if a hygienist wants to make $45, $50 an hour, if you're able to produce enough, you can make that much. And everybody wins in that situation. If you are to the end where you're happy making $30 an hour, you can probably get away with somebody producing less.
So you said...
it's the same way that accountants are evaluated. It's the same way attorneys are evaluated. They'll look at how much have you produced versus how much are we paying you.
So you flippantly said, the hygienist, 30% of production should be hygienists, and if you don't have hygienists doing 30% of production, you're not going to get to that 55% overhead. The ADA, or is the ADA still saying that on their numbers the average overhead is 64%? I think that was the last number I saw.
Last one I saw, yep.
64%. So 64% would be the mean, the mode, the average. How does a dentist get to 55%?
I think there's two real big costs that you need to control. One is the labor. It's a biggest cost is labor far and away. And I think you need to have your wages at 24% or less and the all-in staff costs at 27, 28% or less. If you're way higher than that, number one, it's going to be hard to fix.
Okay, but I want you to address something because you're so smart, and a lot of these guys, I know the younger kids are missing what you're saying, and that is a dentist will sit down at the study club and say, yeah, my labor is 25%. But you just said, but the all-included labor, because does that include uniforms, health insurance, 401k? So talk about, you said wages 24%, but all-inclusive 27 and 28. What's the difference between wages and all-inclusive? And what is that dentist across the street from you when he's telling you his low labor wages? What is the all-inclusive things that this guy is not putting in the number?
He's probably not including the payroll taxes. He's probably not going to include any health insurance or health insurance reimbursement, not including uniforms, not including any retirement contributions that are being made on behalf of the staff, any continuing education that might be specific benefit for the staff versus an entire office. But I also think it comes down to a lot of offices, when they talk about overhead, we're not always looking at apples and oranges.
Oh, you think?
And in my opinion, and I don't know if the Tim Lotts or Sam Martins, those guys would necessarily agree, what we look at is this concept called operating income. And it's basically everything before the doctors get paid, before any truly discretionary expense. So you put your spouse on the payroll, really for purposes of doubling up your 401k, or you got the kids on the payroll because they're quote-unquote cleaning the office. And also before depreciation and interest. Because, depending on the life cycle of a practice, some practices have a lot of interest expense, a lot, once they're established, they don't have any. Depreciation is one of those things where, depending on what the tax laws are, somebody might buy $150,000 of equipment one year, and then the next year they don't buy anything. So we look at that operating income, and that's what we use to say 55% should be the goal that you're trying to get. And if you can have your staff wages in line, and I think the other big one's occupancy expenses, because that's a hard one to fix. If you're in a plant that's way too big for your level of production and you have occupancy expenses at 10%, it's very hard to make up other expenses to get you to the 55% overhead.
So you're saying all-inclusive labor has got to be 27 to 28% or under?
Correct.
And occupancy expense needs to be what?
I would say 5 to 6%.
5 to 6%.
Now, if you're a newer practice and you're growing or you did a startup, obviously that metric's going to be way out of whack. And, somebody who's doing a startup practice, some of these metrics, when we talk about trying to hit 55%, it's going to take a few years to get there because everything's just going to look goofy for a little while until you get your production ramped up. But if you're an established practice, you are kind of what you want to be when you grow up as a dentist. You need to have the staff wages in line, and I think you need to have the occupancy expenses in line.
Okay, keep going. Lab, supplies, electric, toilet, plumber.
You know,
Keep going.
the supplies, I mean, we've seen kind of trickle upwards a little bit over the few years as the dollar's been devalued. So I'd say 7% is a target, where historically it was always 6%. And now that more and more dentists are doing implants and kind of changing their production mix a little bit, depending on where they code things, we could see supplies at a slightly higher level. Lab fees, it depends on the office. I mean, a lot of offices have made the move to E4D and CRAC in our area. So we expect to see those drop to 2 to 3% because there's still supplies that you have to do in order to support that. But it's going to, both of those will depend a little bit on the nature of the office.
So if you have CAD/CAM, you're saying your lab bill should be 3 to 4%?
I would say so.
And if you don't have CAD/CAM, what would lab bill need to be?
Usually about 6 to 7% in most practices.
6 to 7%. And one thing I've noticed, one of the reasons I think supplies have been trickling up is because if you get into CAD/CAM big time and you're buying those blocks from your supply rep, Henry Schein, Burkhart, Benco, Patterson, if you're putting that $15 block on your supply bill, well, that was your lab bill. So I see a lot of supplies that have all those CAD/CAM blocks, but you were astute to say, well, no, your lab bill will still be 3 to 4% because you'll still be doing some lab procedures. But I assume, were you also saying that all those CAD supplies would be categorized under your lab bill, or?
We typically, in trying to get to apples with every client, we typically tell them if you're doing implant or Invisalign or CAD/CAM, to put those in the lab expense, because if you're doing implants, it's really a replacement to some extent to do a bridge or a crown or something like that. So if we're comparing true dental supplies to true dental supplies, we don't want to have those expenses within there. So we'd like to see those over in lab.
And also, for my 20% of viewers who are not from the United States, this is confusing because in Germany, like in America, when I go to my doctor and he does any lab bills, I pay the lab directly to the lab. When I go to the hospital for my kidney stone and you get the bill, the hospital has a bill, the doctor had a bill, but labs had a bill. And in Germany, when you go to the dentist to get a crown, you pay the lab direct. But in America, just in dentistry, which is only 5% of the healthcare budget, for some weird reason, we pay the lab man, and then we bill the patient. So it's kind of confusing. And I don't think we should. I don't think any patient should pay the doctor's lab bills. I think the patient should pay the lab, and the patient should pay the doctor, and I don't think you should pay the doctor to pay the lab. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And one last thing. So what do you think of the total bomb that just went off in the dental supply business when Amazon.com joined the Dental Trade Manufacturers Association and their CEO, Jeff Bezos, saying, we are going into dental supplies? That was a shock wave. I mean, that was an earthquake magnitude 10 if you work for Patterson, Schein, Benco, Burkhart, whatever. Do you think that that's going to have any significance in the next 5 years, or do you think that's something that won't really be a factor for 10 to 20?
I think it's going to have some significance in it. I think it's going to be a driver to lower prices overall. I think Schein and Patterson are going to continue to have to try to find ways to add value. You can buy these supplies from anywhere, but for example, a Schein is going to try to say, hey, we do business brokerages. We have all these value-added services, so that's why you should do business with Schein, and you get that as a Schein client. Patterson's going to make kind of the same claims where they're trying to do a lot of value-added services and to say, yeah, you could probably get your supplies already cheaper directly from somebody, but because the sales guy's dropping in all the time and talking to you and knows the industry, there's some value to having that relationship. And it'll be interesting to see if people continue to value that.
I think it's the same reason they should use you as a CPA firm that 80% of your clients are dentists. The same reason in picking the implant company. There's so many, you got 275 companies. Yeah, you could buy them from anywhere, any country on earth tomorrow on price. But the people that have the best implant practices buy from companies simply because they have a broker that's in their city that comes by and can do value-added stuff. And what I like most about my supply Rep Val is she can say, well, this doctor's doing this and this doctor tried that. Well, you should call him, or I'll fix up a lunch for you two to go meet each other. So it's having a community connection. I would rather buy an implant company from someone that I have a face-to-face friend. I'd rather use an accountant that I can pick up the phone and talk dentistry about, not just not my office, but the industry. And I think you make the most money when you're buying from people who have the biggest picture. Just like my first lab, man, I'll never forget it. In '87, everybody said the best lab was this German guy born in Germany, is Wolfgang. And man, I went down there, and I mean, he could just show you more about how to prep a tooth right than any lecture I could have taken at the Arizona State Dental Association. And what was so neat is he could just walk down and show me tray after tray and mounted case after mounted case with mine in hand, showing me how other people were doing better this or better that, and it was just, so I was using my lab man not based on price, but the fact that I had a guy 25 years older than me taking me under his wing. You know what I mean?
And the funny thing about supplies is, and the supply guy will be the first one to tell you, is clients will fight tooth and nail to move from 8% to 7%, and in the meantime they have staff costs at 33%. So they're not even going after the low-hanging fruit. They're trying to, save this incremental amount.
That was one of my oldest jokes from when I started lecturing in 1990. I said back then, why are you paying your dental assistant $15 an hour to go shop through a catalog and say 12 cents on gauze? Does that make any sense to you? And that's exactly. So you have this high labor, and that's the 400-pound gorilla labor cost. And then, so if you're sitting there thinking you're going to spend the weekend putting a lockbox over the thermostat and put in some thermostat control computerized system to lower your electric bill ain't your cost. And on that, so you talked about all-inclusive labor, 27, 28 under, talking about occupancy expense, 5 to 6% or less. If you have CAD CAM, your lab should be 3 to 4. If you don't, 6 to 7. Supplies, 7%. What's next after that? Go all the way to 0.
Then then we look at if all the other general and administrative expenses. So you have your professional fees, your office supplies, advertising, dues and subscriptions, continuing education, so on and so forth. We like to see the total of that at about 12% or less. So if you can, have a system whereby you keep your staff costs at around 24%.
Okay, that's a huge number, 12%. So go through those items again. What all equals 12%?
It's going to be your continuing education, dues and subscriptions, office supplies, professional fees, consultants. Trying to think of a few other off the top of my head. Insurance, your liability insurance and stuff like that. Advertising is usually the biggest one out of that group.
Yeah. So that's what I was keen on. So of that 12%, what of that do you see the most, the people making the most net income, how much are they spending on advertising? Or what do you think the advertising range should be?
We usually see in our most successful practices when we chart them out, advertising being at about 1.5% to 2%, which a lot of people will say it should be higher. But when we've gone into the clients who've done it a higher amount, we've said, okay, how many patients have you gotten from this advertising that you're spending? And is that advertising spend translating into, say, $350 per patient acquisition, give or take?
So you like to see the advertising get a new patient in the chair at $350 per patient or less?
Yes. Because you could go out and buy a book of business for about that price. And if, it's costing you $700 to add a patient through your advertising, you might be better off just going and buying a patient list or buying out a dentist who might be retiring close by, maybe lower hanging fruit.
Okay, so you're really showing off your degree of sophistication, because when you look at the Fortune 500, they're always doing mergers and acquisitions. And when I look at some of the biggest practices that have ever been built, they're usually small rural towns, and the dentist has done some mergers and acquisition. The old man, Frank, was retiring up the street, and they went over there and bought that practice. So talk mergers and acquisitions. Does your firm do that?
My partner, Andy Lemcool, he's actually one of those hated brokers who's out there that are so well respected within Dental Town. But his job is to, if a doctor's selling a practice or they want to merge a partnership together.
What did you mean by that comment? You said well-respected, hated. I didn't get it. That was a joke or something.
In dental town, usually you don't see a lot of love for brokers.
Oh, okay.
Or
lawyers. Or lawyers. So who is this guy?
His name's Andy Lemkool. He's a broker by trade. He used to buy practices for one of the DSOs in our state.
And he's in your firm, Edge Advise?
Mm-hmm.
Will he do a podcast with me too?
I think we could get him to. Sure.
Yeah. So do you see what percent of dentists do you think take advantage of a merger and acquisition of a practice retiring in their neighborhood?
I don't think enough, because
right, exactly.
It's that whole E-myth kind of thing where we're all professionals. So I'm an accountant, you're a dentist, somebody's a lawyer, and you spend all your time kind of practicing your skill versus thinking, okay, what's in the best interest of my business? And in a lot of cases, say, I'm perfectly content spinning the wrenches here, being a dentist. Yeah, this is maybe a good financial opportunity, but maybe not worth the headache. Instead of saying, hey, this might be a great opportunity, I can subcontract out or hire the right people to do the stuff that I don't like to do and make a lot more money by taking advantage of that.
But I'm telling you, listeners out there, I mean, if you got to know, the word capital comes from Latin for head. You got to know how much money it costs you to acquire a new customer. And you're saying that $350 and under is a return on investment. Is that correct? That if you can,
I think it needs to be at that, because if it's not, you're better off buying a practice.
So you got some 73-year-old man across the street says I had enough, and he's got 1,000 charts, and you say, well, my office, it cost me $250 to get a new patient, and he's got 1,000 charts, so 1,000 times 250. You say, hey, I'll buy your 1,000 charts at $250 a piece, and he says, yes. That's a hell of a smart idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those older doctors' patients, usually, they always use the term gold mine, but there's usually a lot of deferred maintenance. That doctor's taking a ton of time off, so now that the patients can actually get into the chair. And those tend to be very good buys.
And no offense to the older guys. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail on this, but they seem to miss a hell of a lot of perio too. I mean, my God, when they come in from 65 to 70-year-old, I mean, every page is the same. Oh yeah, I've got my teeth cleaned every 6 months, and they got like 9mm pockets, and they do a lot of patchwork, lots of big amalgams that all breaking down new crowns. But I want to get back to specifically on that practice. What he might have 5,000 charts, but what would be your definition of a chart worth $350? Someone who's been in the last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. What would be your specific countdown?
I consider an active patient to be in the last 12 months. I know some people use 18 months or 24 months, but obviously I think once they get past a year, the likelihood of them coming back just drops. So what
about the distance? I mean, how close does this practice need to be to yours before you think those people say, oh yeah, I'll go over there?
It really depends. If you're in a metropolitan area, it could be as few as 2 to 3 miles as a lifetime. If you're in a rural area, 10 miles might not be a big deal. So it kind of depends on what your area is and kind of what the demographics of the area are.
And if you had a client who was spending 4% on advertising and you thought the acquisition head cost was maybe $450 or $500 a head, what resource would you point that person for to get a better bang for their buck on dental marketing so they could get bodies in the chair for less than $350?
I would look at what they're actually doing in terms of marketing. Do they have a robust website that's showing up on SEO? Are they doing some internal marketing? A lot of times most businesses don't have a very good leave behind piece, or like some type of really nice brochure that I can take out of there to go, okay, I'm coming in to see Dr. Farran for X. And I take this leave behind piece and all of a sudden I go, hey, this guy can do this, he can do this, he can do that. And I might not need it now, but a year from now or 2 years from now when I do need that, I understand that you have that capability. One of the biggest things we've done for our own marketing is a concept of having a really nice leave behind piece, because most people are going to come in because they need accounting services. So they get this really nice book that's a little bit too nice for them to throw away. And someday they flip through it and go, oh, yeah, you guys can help us with marketing, or you can help us with hygiene coaching. Or, yeah, I'm thinking of selling my practice. I forgot your partner does that. So I don't think dentists do a very good job of communicating what their skill set really is. I think the public perception is, well, okay, my tooth hurts, you fix it. I come in for a pro fee. But there's a lot more that you guys can do that I believe if you laid it out to a customer in that fashion, they'd probably buy it at some point.
Okay, I want to take this interview completely different. Let's just table that. We just did 50 minutes. Let's table everything we just said, and let's have a man-to-man talk about, you've been in this industry 20 years. In the last 20 years, out of nowhere has come these big DSO, dental service organizations, Heartland Dental, 1,500 locations, Pacific Dental Services with Steve Thorne, all this stuff. And you're talking right now to 5,000 kids who just got out of dental school a week ago, and they're entering this industry that you've been in 20 years. Truthfully, is there any chance this young kid is going to be able to compete with a DSO? Is the change going to be, because I'm old enough where when I was little, every pharmacist owned their own business. And now every pharmacist works for Walgreens or CVA. Is that where dentistry is going? Is dentistry going to be Walgreens, or can I still compete?
Only if the dentists allow it to. And I think you're going to see consolidation in a lot of industries. I'm part of an industry of accounting that's seen unprecedented consolidation amongst firms. When I came out of school, there was probably no fewer than 40, 50 options that I would have to go and work. Now there's about 10 firms left. I look at our biggest competitors. Our biggest competitors in our state are 4 of the top 50 biggest firms in the entire country that we're going head-to-head with every time, and we've survived. I think patients, by and large, we get our generic client and they get panicked because Midwest Dental or Forward Dental moves across the street from them. And the reality is 3 months later they go, okay, that was our best referral source. Because they're turning over their doctors, the doctors aren't staying. I think consumers like choice, and for some it's going to be a corporate dentist, and I think they have their role, but there's still too much profit, I think too much opportunity within dental that, for right or wrong, we at Edge have hitched our wagon to, our concept is to try to help preserve private practice dentistry. And to be honest, if we didn't think that could be done, we need to find another line of work, because to some extent we're dependent on there still being private practice dentists out there that we can provide accounting services for. I don't really know how to do anything else.
And and I want to try to put some older spin on this after a half century living on this rock, and that the greatest investor in the world didn't live in Wall Street and get caught up in all the hype. Warren Buffett stayed in Omaha, Nebraska, and taught at Creighton University. I mean, went and gave guest lecture at Creighton University when I went there in 1980, and I drove by his house a few times. Just a down-to-earth guy. And another great book, Peter Lynch, Beating the Street. They keep saying to you, don't listen to the hype. Listen to real people in your backyard. And every single time I talk to any earthling in Phoenix at a restaurant, whatever, my dental experience, they've always have gone through 3 or 4 or 5 dentists because they're not happy with something, this or that or that. You never hear them saying, well, I'm going to the big chain or this, that. I mean, it seems like they're never happy with their dentist, and they've had to go to several dentists, and probably 80% of the people, if they're my age, if they're 50, they've already gone through 6 dental offices. So why would you think that one chain is going to have the advantage when the 5 independent dentists didn't help them? And if you would just stay focused on that patient and be patient-focused and not dentist-focused, they're not looking at a chain. They're wanting to know why you went to fix his tooth and they can't chew on it, why you fix his tooth and it looks funny, and why is there a dark line here, and you're, blah, blah, or your, dentist talked down to me, or he was rude or whatever. So, yeah, so I'm going to ask you this. What advantages does someone like Heartland or Pacific have that an individual dentist doesn't have as far as a competitive advantage that I need to be aware of if I'm a kid and I'm going to go buy a $400,000 dental practice? What is the average dental practice that you see a client buying? What's about the average price?
$400,000 to $500,000.
Yeah, and what would you say their average student loan debt is?
$275,000 to $350,000.
Okay, and how much is the house that they're living in?
It could be depending on their area, $250,000. They're going to have a lot of debt.
And if they're a
But
man,
I would always tell somebody,
and if they're a man, what percent of their wives have a job versus staying home?
right now, of our clients at least, about 80%.
80% of the wives don't have a job.
And a lot of dentists seem to be marrying dentists, we've noticed.
But that's my
reason.
point. That's my point. So if you're a man, 80% of them have a stay-home wife without a job. But if you're a woman,
80% of them have a wife who's out working.
okay, 80%. Okay, it wasn't that way when I got to school. But if you're a woman dentist, what percent of them have a husband that out there have a job?
For our clients, actually surprisingly less than that number.
Are you serious?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest changes I've seen in the last 5 to 6 years, for lack of a better term, is the rise of the female owner. And a lot of our new clients right now are female dentists, and then because they're able to make a very good living, their husband has assumed the traditional role, that we had in the past of staying home with the kids, or maybe doesn't make as much money because they're being more flexible because their spouse now is out owning a business and investing their time in that. So we've seen a big change in that. But
if you ever meet any women dentists like that are single, can you refer me their other contact information? but that is amazing, because a lot of the dentists my age, one of the biggest stressful things they have is a spouse that not only doesn't have a job but spends a hell of a lot of money every month, and that is so stressful to a marriage. And you just see so many boys and girls getting married in dental school right now, and I just think those are all the ones I know. When they met their wife in dental school and they're dentist and they have an office, they just seem to be rich and happy. It just seems like the luckiest dentists out there are the ones who married a girl in their class, and that's my main message every time I lecture in a dental school. Don't worry about getting an A in biochemistry. Try to marry one of these girls in the class. It'll be the best decision you ever made.
But to your question on Heartland Dental, what advantage they have, to me, it's the study clubs and the dental associations out there. Because the older dentists right now are telling anybody who's willing to listen to them that, boy, it really stinks to be a dentist these days. And that's not every one of them. But some of our clients will go to a study club the first time and go, well, that just wasn't for me, because it was all woe is me, golden age of dentistry is dead, we're doomed. So I think that's why it's great sites like yours are out there that people can freely communicate and say, it's not all that bad. There's a lot of opportunity there if you're willing to go ahead and do it. But so many young kids don't think they can own a practice right now. And the state associations aren't doing anything about it. Their study clubs aren't doing anything about it. And, to me, that's a shame.
Okay, so I'm about to get to work. I'm gonna be pulling up at my office in 3 minutes. So we're at 58 minutes, 2 minutes. And I have $275,000 in student loans, and I thought there's no way I could get a loan, and I want to buy a practice. Can they call you? Or how should they get a hold of you? Do you prefer a phone call, an email? What do you prefer?
Whatever's easiest for them.
Well, give out whatever you want to give out.
Our phone number is 414-759-9629, and my email is mike@edgeadvise.com. And I guess all we could say is it's a lot easier to service that debt if you're making $250,000 a year than if you're only making $125,000. And you'll make a lot more money as a practice owner than you will as an associate.
And let me ask you if my walnut brain, if you agree with the way my walnut brain works on buying a practice. A lot of dentists, they want to save money on a practice, so they want to buy the practice for $200,000 instead of the practice for $400,000. But in my walnut brain, I always looked at that as, well, if you buy a house for $200,000 and then hold it for 10 years and sell it, you're selling a house that you bought for $200,000. But if you bought a house that was for $400,000, now you're selling a house for $400,000. To my walnut brain, I just wanted to buy the biggest cash flow I could buy. And why would I buy a practice for $200,000 that's only bringing in so much money when I could have bought a much bigger one? But a lot of the dentists, I think they see the much bigger one as too much money when actually you're buying a cash flow. And wouldn't you want to use other people's money for leverage debt from U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo, PNC, Bank of America to buy a larger cash flow, especially when you just said it's a lot easier to pay that back if you're making $250,000 a year?
Well, I think you want to buy a practice that's commensurate with your ability to produce. So if you can produce $50,000 a month, to me, you need to be looking at practices that, between yourself and hygiene, are going to be collecting $800,000 because you can
And how
handle that
much,
workload.
and how much would that $800,000 practice be selling for?
Depending on its profitability, it's going to be somewhere between, say, $480,000 and $600,000. It could be a little bit higher, it could be a little bit lower than that. But I can say if it's a well-run practice and you're able to get in there and run it well, the owner doctor is going to start making $350,000 to $375,000 a year producing what you're producing as an associate. Or if you're producing $600,000 as an associate, maybe you're making $150,000, maybe $200,000 at the most.
So if this dentist wants to call you, is there a consulting fee? I mean, do you what if some kids listening to this wants to ask you a question? Is there a fee to talk to you, or how does this work?
We actually have unlimited phone call and email access. When people want to ask questions, client or not, they can ask away. We don't send them a bill, and we just do flat fee billing for our accounting.
Okay, so in a nutshell, guys, this guy's hot. I'm a big fan of the firm, the site. If you have access to capital despite what everyone tells you. In fact, that's why all rich countries have so much debt. It's because you have so much access to capital. I mean, when people complain about how much student loan debt people have, I remind them one of the reasons they have so much student loan debt is because someone was willing to loan it to them, and you spent probably a third of that on shit you didn't need. An apartment that was too nice, a car that was too nice, and trips and cruises and all that stuff. So this is America. You got access to capital, and this dude just told you that you can get 100% financing from 4 major banks, and he'll talk to you about it for free at 414-759-9629. Hey, Mike Bark, thank you so much for spending an hour of your day with me. And my last go-away question is what is that hanging on your wall? It's a cow skull, but it's painted green?
It's our wealth advisor has a friend who takes bison skulls and creates art with them. So it's actually our logo is on there.
Oh, right on.
So,
all right, buddy.
It's a unique piece of art. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour for me. I think my listeners got a hell of a lot of information in that hour.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, buddy. Have a great day.
You too.